Good afternoon. My name is Heather Napash. I am a Talking Together facilitator that I work with Anishinaabe Legal Services. I actually started it. I'll just do a brief update on myself. So I worked at Nan Legal as a student placement for a little bit. I went to college, and then after that, I've been there since. And it's been about almost 13 years with the Nan Legal Services in the same program. Okay. So I'm originally from Constance Lake First Nation, but growing up here in the Thunder Bay area, lived here for all my life. And I'm just, oh, there's Kristy. Yeah, so that's a little bit about myself, working with Nan Legal Services, and there's my coworker. I was just doing my introduction, Kristy.
Okay.
So you can go.
Oh, you're done.
Yeah.
So off to a great start for me. I got kicked out, but I'm back. So my name is Kristy, and I'm one of the aftercare workers for my journey back home here in Thunder Bay with Anishinaabe Legal Services.
Okay, so I'll just start with the first slide. So, thank you for coming into this shop here. We're going to talk about the program, My Journey Back Home, Nikiwewin. As a facilitator, I'm one of the facilitators for this program, and then also have William Shawanamash, and then our aftercare workers, Dana, and I hope I'm able to. Okay. Just give me a second. This over a little bit. So I'll start with the first slide, then I'll continue, Kristy, and then as questions come through, just let us know and we'll answer them as we're going through. If you need anything to clarify, just let us know. So Anishinaabe Legal Services, My Journey Back Home, was a project geared towards Indigenous youth living in Thunder Bay between the ages 12 and 29. So part of the mandate for the program itself is that they had to have a Thunder Bay address or not, oh wait. Sorry, I had a notification pop up. So yes, it is for young youth living in Thunder Bay, and that they have to have a Thunder Bay address.
Sorry, you're on mute.
Am I muted?
You and Kristy both got muted. Sorry about that, Heather. There's
You can hear me, right?
some stuff happening behind the scenes, which I'm trying to attend to. My apologies.
Sorry. It says something like unmute or something.
Yeah, you're good now. We
Yes,
can hear you.
My Journey Back Home is an alternative dispute resolution. We have the facilitator and aftercare workers in our program, and then also provides an ADR process. The Talking Together is more of a traditional circle for our youth that we are servicing and when we're involved in our circles with them. And then also when we're in the circle process, we also want everyone to be respectful, share kind words, and be, listen to everyone at the same time with having that open ear and open heart, knowing that what was going to be said in the circle will remain in the circle, and giving the person that free opportunity to share and to speak and be heard. So in this process, the participants include family, community resources, and supports of their choice. We have the ability to invite people to come into the circle, to be there with that client or our youth that we're servicing. But also we let them have that opportunity to guess or invite who they feel comfortable being involved in their circle with them. And then also sometimes I think very beginning process, it just gets them the opportunity to know and who's going to be there, and having that support system with them. Okay, I'm gonna go. Okay, Kristy, you're up.
So a big part of my journey back home is we don't work in the typical business hours.
I can't hear you, Kristy.
It doesn't say I'm muted.
Is that me?
Can anybody else hear me?
Now I can hear you.
Okay.
We can hear you on this end.
Okay. So the nice thing with my journey back home is it's all about meeting the clients slash community members where they're at. And that involves not working the traditional business hours, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. So we always have somebody on call. Our main goal as aftercare workers within this program is meeting our support workers and clients where they're at. So for certain reasons, and this is just, it's not limited to this list. So it's involving whatever support they need, whether it's domestic violence, human trafficking, homelessness, addictions, mental health, lack of education, legal issues, lack of life skills, basic needs. The main source of support is filling the gaps from point A to point B. So if somebody, for example, would come to us seeking treatment for addiction, we would start out their intake and we would get right on trying to allocate funding, the appropriate treatment center for them anywhere across Canada, and get them set up with that. As their goals are obtained, we still continue their file so long as they want us on their file. So it's just their goal may have changed. Now they might want sober living. So we would come together in another ADR circle approach with all of the other agencies that might be involved, family, friends, all the positive supports in the client's circle. And we would change the goal to sober living. And then as my job, it would be to find the right resource for that and just follow them along. Kind of in a nutshell. So like Heather said, being that we're with Anishinaabe Legal Services, they don't, for our program specifically, do not have to be from a NAN community. They just have to live within Thunder Bay, whether that be their own residence or a shelter, already here seeking treatment. The options are open. The busiest times for us is evenings and weekends. And that's why we really advocated to have this role available to our community members outside of those business hours. So we always have somebody available to meet where they're at.
So part of the circle process, as we explained, is that we do use a traditional circle. And then we invite the participants who the client or youth want to be involved with. So I'm just gonna, like, it's not limited to only these people, but sometimes we do have a smaller circle, larger circle, just depends on how many people our youth or young person that we're working with want to have involved with them. So we would have in the circle process, we have our main focus is our person that we're working with, the youth, the adult. Then we'll have the facilitator and aftercare worker, any type of family support persons or key workers that they're involved with. We also invite their chief and council or someone who has a banner program involved in the circle. They can be as well. So the aim is that the youth will recognize his or her potential and look at what we are doing and what is going on, how the information is being processed, how can I, accomplish it? These are some of the questions that we may feel that, by working with our youth, that we're asking them these questions involved in the circle. We try to figure out what their needs are, coming together, acknowledging what has to happen and how that will happen. It all comes from the participants involved in the circle itself. So we do have the ability to invite as many people as we can, but also making sure that we're client focused on the youth itself. So part of it is the aftercare worker will follow up between the circles, ensure that these tasks are being completed by everybody that was set in the circle, right? So once we are done in the circle, we have a report that's being made, and that report was going to be shared, because we all agreed upon in the circle what we were doing. So if, for instance, if one of our youth wanting to get his or her maybe some form of identification, so they wanted to get their health card. Well, and then that circle will have the aftercare worker or even someone who else, like a family member, who is able to bring that youth to a Service Ontario to receive their health card. So that is a simple task for somebody, but for some others, it may be harder or difficult to get that because maybe they don't have the other identification that they need, birth certificates or another form of identification. Like these are little things that we feel that our youth are struggling with, some of the basics, and then having them be supportive in that circle or afterwards so that they're able to continue and, move forward in the best way possible with them.
I could just add to the circle process. So what have found that works really well by using the ADR circle process within my journey back home is it's very often our clients will have other agencies involved in their circle of care as well. So this gives us an opportunity to all come together in one place rather than just relying on emails and phone calls. We're physically in a circle together, with the client obviously being the number one, and putting together that care plan in a personal way rather than phone calls and emails. And then when the circle's over, there's no discrepancies on who's been delegated to do what aspect within the client's care. It also makes them feel special, important, worthy of the plan going together. And it's really shown high success for us by this part, especially when it is something sending somebody away for treatment or, if they're leaving the city to go to something, this is really what they take with them. And having the elder is a huge part of this as well. And it's meaningful. And the feedback from the clients and other agencies is this is the process of the program that they really enjoy and look forward to. And is just proven to work really well.
Do you want to continue with this one,
For
Kristy?
sure. So, as an aftercare worker, I assist the youth in navigating systems to develop community connections. Um, Referrals to outside agencies is obviously a huge one for that, whether it's finding safe housing, getting back into school, whatever the situation may be. I kind of take, as an aftercare worker, we take that work off of the client's shoulders to make it less stressful for them and find the resources that they need in those connections, and not only find them, but help support them to those meetings if they need to do so. Instead of just saying, okay, you have a counselor's appointment at this location 2 weeks from now, we make sure and follow up and bring them to the appointment if needed and follow up while waiting for that appointment. Um, so we also connect them with traditional supports if that's what they're using or if that's what they're looking for. Employment, training, advocacy, life skills, mental health, addiction, housing, legal services. We've helped many clients come into us with human trafficking and they just don't know where to start. So we really work as that liaison coordinator slash just finding what they need. If it's hard enough for them to delegate and where to go, then we take that for them. The individual will continuously be supported with us through follow-up circles to ensure that they stay on the good path. And the principle is that they obtain their goals from the plan and gain success on their journey. So even if they do go, we still follow the client no matter where they go. If they do leave for treatment or safe housing or education or whatever the situation may be, we still follow them while they're there. Only our circles have now turned into virtual circles, and we connect with their counselor or therapist or whoever their workers are in that facility. We still stay connected, just a bit in a different way.
Okay. So for my journey back home, we thought about what the needs were, what type of rationale we were thinking about. So for this program itself, the initiative is based on barriers for Indigenous youth who experience living in Thunder Bay. Wait, I read that wrong. So barriers Indigenous youth experience living in Thunder Bay. So then identified barriers are mental health and addictions. Some of it was already said earlier in the other slide. Plus so with that, there's high suicide rates, discrimination, overrepresentation of Indigenous population in prisons and in child welfare systems. So the high unemployment rates and an overwhelming number of missing and murdered Indigenous women, men, and children. So the young youth, adults living who are experiencing homeless are highly impacted by the consequences of the pandemic. So prior during COVID, we noticed that remember the rules for only people living in the same household can be in the house, and for our youth at that time, if they didn't have a permanent address or if they didn't living in that home, where would they go? Or so we were trying to figure out different things about in the past and how that trickles into today. So with that, we had some, we noticed that there was the risky living situations as to where they're living and how they're living and how are they making ends meet for themselves. So it is hoped that the My Journey Back Home project will fill the gaps and opportunities and guide youth in a breaking a negative cycle, and then by finding success in their journey to the good life. So by that, when we're working with the individuals themselves, they are identifying what they need help with, and how they're going to do that is between the participants involved in that circle process with them, but also ensuring that there's a follow-up through that everything is being met. So when we are working with them, they're putting in more of the work of themselves, and then they're being held responsible for their actions as to what they agreed upon in the circle, and allowing them the time that, the time frame, because sometimes it could be easier for them to grasp things, but it might be more difficult in how we're working with them. So just giving them the chance to say, and oh, okay. So I think our slide is very short, but if we have any questions, we can answer them as well. And then I just want to explain that. So in My Journey Back Home, we do have our program manager, Carol Buswa, and then our assistant is Zelda Watt. She's team lead for our programs. And then also for the facilitations, myself and William. And then we have the aftercare workers, Kristy, Martyn, and Dana Goudreau. So we kept our PowerPoint small, but we just want to have any what would the word be? Shared experiences that we want to share with you guys as well. I think that was our last slide. Oh, this one is just for resources, and we can leave that up as we're talking. But so I think that when we're working with the youth that are involved in our My Journey Back Home, the approval process, it's you fill in a referral, we send that off to our manager, and from there she makes the decision for yes or no, and most likely it's all yeses that we work with, because I find that when we're working with the youth, it's we have to meet them where they're at, and like pretty much get to them quicker, right? Because if they're waiting for something and they don't feel like, it's going to be harder for them to accept, like to grab it or something like that, and they just take their time. And then if we don't work on as fast as we can with them, we may lose them. So having the opportunity to do a wraparound circle with them, or even having them contact the facilitator or aftercare worker if they're stuck in a situation that they may need. So that's why I'm really glad with this program here. We have the aftercare workers who are willing to work with them a little bit above and beyond as to what they go through. And being available to the client or youth that we're working with, especially when they need us, because then they have the opportunity to meet with them outside rather than 9 to 5 working schedule. And then on the weekends they're open and to meeting with them.
We really try to make the intake process as simple as possible. So when a call or email comes in for a referral, we really try to meet the community member within a 24-hour baseline. And no matter the location. The social workers, for example, at our hospital here in Thunder Bay know of this program, and we've been called to, say, adult mental health quite regularly, because when a client or patient is discharged from there, if the social worker and the patient know that they would like more extended aftercare support once discharged from the hospital, the social worker can't follow them once discharged. So we've been called to kind of take over the file, and we'll meet with the client. And whatever we do is all dependent on what the community member wants. Their circle is all dependent on who they want at the circle. We never invite anybody in that's not suggested from the client themselves. And if they want the referrals to other agencies, because this is a voluntary based program, we only do what they're wanting to do and agree to do. So from the intake, sorry, so that we make sure we do the intake, like I said, within 24 hours of the referral coming through, and then it is processed just as quickly. And then we start on the initial circle and start putting together the plan right away. Sorry, I think I couldn't see the question, but it did pop up that there was one.
So we actually have 2 questions in the chat. I'll start with number 1. By writing a report, don't you break the what is said in the circle, stays in the circle?
So for that one, we do have to, as a facilitator, I'd be the only one taking notes, and we want to ensure that it's being captured what was said in the circle. So by having an actions, like what everyone is agreeing to, that's what we put down in the report. It's not word for word what is exactly said in the circle, but we just want to do a brief summary, and then having most of our, what would it be, the actions being stated, who's going to do what, where they're going to, delegation of everything. That's where we want the information for the report. Just so we have, so everyone knows what they agreed upon, or how they're going to do that and where they're going to go.
Thanks, Heather. Here's question number 2 for both you and Kristy. Do you measure success as in a decline in repeat offender rates, behavior in school or community?
Sorry, it clicked out.
Sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it just, the beginning clicked out.
My apologies. Do you measure success as in a decline in repeat offender rates, behavior in schools or community?
Heather, how? So success for us is if they're reaching their goals, that's success to us. I don't really know. Heather, do you have a better way of answering that?
I would say like when we're measuring of success, like I think if we have a client who say they wanted to go for treatment, and they did the runaround, it took them a while, but then they actually finished, they went to their treatment, they attained their goal, and they went through the like addictions for counseling or treatment center, and they completed it, whether it's a 30-day, 28 days, or however long that they stayed in the program for. I would say that would be how we measure our successes. Like when, how would I say it? It's so when we first meet with the client, the individual, if they say they want to go to treatment, and by coming into the program, we identified a service plan with them, They know how they're going to get to the treatment. They are going to treatment, and next, that they are in treatment. And then we hear from them that they completed their how many days that they stayed in treatment for. And then their next one is, like Kristy said, is sober living. Where are they gonna go when they get home from treatment? So that's another thing that we have to start looking forward to, is figuring out where are they going to live after, or do they still have a residence here in Thunder Bay, or where are they going to go stay with their family, friend, cousin. So those are just some of the things that we work with, and figuring out our success is different from what they want. So whatever they need help with, I think that's how we make a measure for success, our planning, I should say.
Maybe I should rephrase my question. It seems to be that you're then, or maybe I assume it wrong, but is your treatment mainly geared to people, young kids, adults who are having addiction problems, or are you also looking at behavior problems? And I have some specific incidents in mind where I had to deal. I'm not First Nation, but I occasionally, other than being a family mediator, I still have my teaching license. So I help out in a school, and they have, in one particular school, they have a lot of trouble with kids who are from the reserve, and their behavior is going to land them in juvie or in jail if they don't get help now, because it's unacceptable, it's dangerous. A knifing incident took place. I personally was threatened with death because the kid didn't want to follow my directions when I was teaching, apparently. That of course is of great concern, not just to me, but to the entire staff in this large school. And there's the beginning, if not the reality of a little gang having been formed. And so do you deal with those problems as well?
So I think where we would come in for that is, if we're not the right support for the student with behavioral issues, and we have done this in the past, is what happens is we would refer them to a support worker within another agency that is the proper fit, that can, be attendance within the school, or behavioral therapist. So we're kind of the ones that will see what the appropriate outside agencies would be for that child. We would still do our check-ins and have that communication on a regular basis with the child or with the youth, but also make sure that they are set up with the proper resources. Because I think, like, for the situation that you're describing, they would need more than just myself as an aftercare worker. So I would make sure that they're supported with the right workers.
But the problem is that those are the excuses I hear from school administration and others, is that there are no resources available. So do you have sufficient resources in Thunder Bay? Because I live not quite a distance away from Thunder Bay, but there are no resources. Children's Aid is overloaded. There's a police officer who will come and talk to kids, but basically they need a lot more than just a talking to, because obviously that's the first thing that happens. Well, let's talk about this, and then the behavior continues, and that's what concerns me, because a lot of these kids are traumatized. They come from bad families. I mean, they can't help that, but their addiction problems and their domestic violence, and probably even the leftovers of the residential school system, except in that reserve, it's not. I think it is a little longer ago, but still, you can look at all the problems that could lead to that behavior. The lack of parental support. My kid can't do anything wrong, and don't you understand? An excuse I heard, well, we were traumatized. Well, okay, but so who's going to do something about it? before they actually do something so serious, they'll end up in the court system. So do you have those resources, and where can we
We
find
do.
it?
Yeah, so, and just as an example, for one
Mm.
of the community members, a youth that we had last year, kind of what you're saying, but not maybe to that high need. But that was the comeback, is that we needed a mental health counselor within our high schools that wasn't affiliated with the school and that wasn't affiliated with the communities the kids are coming from. So we advocated for that, and happy to say that this past September, we were able to get an outside contracted mental health worker. Is it enough? No. Is it a start? Absolutely. And she travels within our public high schools. But the nice thing with her is when school ends, the kids lose their counselors that they have within the high school. With her, she actually can travel to their community as well. So that was like a plus on our side to advocate for that. And it was one of our youth that really brought that to our attention and what was lacking. So, I mean, it's a big step forward, but at the same time, a small step forward, if you get what I mean by that. But we do have a lot of organizations here within the city that do provide the extra support that can come to the families, to the schools, and really get that connection going. But you're right, there are wait lists sometimes. And then that's where we kind of come in to fill the gaps in between. And we build those relationships not only with the youth, but if they're wanting their family involved, then we build it with their family as well.
Well, it sounds like you have more available. And as a matter of fact, I was in this case not even talking about high school. This is the one kid in particular is a grade 7 student. I mean, you can well imagine where that's going to end up, because his behavior is not changing. It's escalating. And now apparently I haven't been in that building for a while, but some of the kids in the junior division are picking up the same kind of behavior, because they maybe look at him as a hero, and because he gets away with doing this, so it's a very bad situation. And I'm not there often enough that I could even get involved, except I was the subject of a threat. So I'm busy doing my other stuff, and I'm getting too old to run out every morning anyway. So anyway, thanks for all the information though, because I will pass it on. I have some good connections at 2 of the reserves around here, so maybe there are grants available. Who knows?
It's definitely tricky for sure. I mean,
Yep.
every school is supposed to be set up with counselors and guidance, and it's that advocacy part that we try to pick up and continue on, and don't let it fall to deaf ears, and just continue on it and constantly check in and try to help move forward and advocate for the youth. Yeah.
Most elementary schools do not have guidance counselors, and in this particular school they do have a native language teacher,
Okay.
but she's already overloaded with the number of kids, and that's nice to see. There's an interest in learning their native tongue, so to speak, but the behavior is in all the other classes mainly. So anyway, thanks for the info.
You're welcome. Just another so here too, we've also connected with, say, Onwa or the Indigenous Friendship Center, and made those connections and brought workers from certain programs within their organization into the school as well. And then I would obviously step out of that part and let them take over, but we have done connections in that way too, and just
Thank
started
you.
to bring the awareness. Yeah,
Okay, thanks.
you're welcome.
We have another question that has popped into the chat. Can you clarify if there are timelines on the items set out in the report, and are these reported back?
So we always like to put a timeline just as a guide. I always say to our community members, I'll never ask somebody to meet me halfway. I'll always say meet me partway, because we're there for them. I will work around the clock for the community member as long as they're showing that they're also helping. And if that means a weekly phone call and that's all they can do, that's fantastic on my end. If it means just showing up to a meeting at a Tim Hortons and that's all they can do, that's fantastic. We put timelines on just more for motivation for them as well, because usually our clients are in desperate need. A lot of our clients are because nobody else will work with them. And their reasons for wanting us are usually something that needs to be handled quickly and not put on hold. So we will do things like that, because for somebody, I know we keep going back to treatment, and that's just because it's one of our huge goals with many of our clients, but there's a lot that leads up to that. So behind the scenes, while I'm finding funding, because treatment isn't always covered, they're meeting me by attending Thunder Bay counseling to get things like their gains assessment and the things that they need to do. And I can provide rides for that as well. So as long as they're continuously doing their part in somehow with the plan moving forward, and if they're not meeting the guidelines, if we haven't heard from them in a certain amount of time, you know, and we know that they're affiliated with another agency, we'll reach out to those outreach workers. Again, keep in mind, these are all agencies that are already on their signed consent that they gave us permission to speak with. We have good connections with the on-street outreach workers, and we'll check in with them and say, you know, have you seen so-and-so? If we haven't had any communication with a client within 30 days, their file generally is then closed, but it's not to say they can't reopen it once they, you know, decide they're ready to try again. If that makes any sense. So we're not ever closing a file just to close it. It's we definitely put in the effort and time, you know, but a lot of people will come forward and want the help and then decide they're not ready for it. So they do just kind of, you know, go back into whatever they were doing, and we hope that they resurface and come back. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So there's really no right or wrong. Every situation is different. Every situation comes with its own set of rules, whether the time frame be shorter or longer. It all depends on the situation. Did I answer that okay?
I think you did good.
Are there any other questions that anybody has? I see we're 2:32 and I've just received an update that one of the other sessions will be moving to end at 3 p.m. now because of getting into this workshop later. And the last session of the day, the workshop number 3, is going to now take place from 3:15 to 4:15. So we do have a bit of time if people have more questions. Or if Kristy and Heather, you tailored your presentation to really fit within that time frame. If there were other areas that you wanted to dive deeper into, you've got the time to be able to do that.
Well, I think with our program itself, we just wanted to make sure that, you know, filling out the information that we get to clarify anything that's missing. So when we get the referral, we always want to make sure that we have a way to contact that youth that we're working with, right? So sometimes it could be just a simple text or a call, or maybe we have to go to their home and physically meet with them in case they didn't have, you know, a cell phone to text or call us. So we would have to go and meet with them. And then from there, we gather all the information that we need from the client, the youth that we have, or additional information such as participants and who they want to be involved with. I think when we first meet with a client, they may say that they have only one person who they want to be involved in the circle with them. And then later on, like, you know, when you meet with them, you talk to them, it's like, oh, how are you getting to this place? Or who's helping you do with this one? And then that's when they start bringing all these resources and bringing people involved, right? Because then they start to realize that that person is more of a support person that they thought at the very beginning. Because I think the more you talk to them, the more comfortable they start feeling, and they start bringing out their information that they need to talk about. And you know, when we talk about this report, we say like, what do they need to do in order to, you know, get point to A to B, figuring out who's going to be helping them in that supportive way. And by all of this, it's all volunteer, right? Because then that's how our program works. It's on a volunteer basis. So when Kristy said that we need to meet, if we don't hear from them in the 30 days, that to us, that feels like they are no longer interested or in the program itself, right? So then that way we would close their file afterwards. But then they can reapply at any time, because sometimes it might not be the right time for them to start, making those positive changes that they want. And I think it may even just be harder for them to start talking about that. Like maybe that's their first step, as acknowledging what's happening. And then that's when it gets pushed, like the fear or, that mentality is getting too heavy for them. So they step back, right? We don't want to make it like a resistance, I guess, when we are working with our youth, because we find that in each situation, and everybody is unique when we're working with them, and their needs are going to be totally different from one person to the next person. But having them know that this process is voluntary, it gives them more of that the strength that, like, to keep going kind of thing. Because by allowing them to know that, they don't have to be here, but you want to be here because you want to. I think that's the difference from, it's not a forced program, I guess, to some people. But yeah.
We're really about building those relationships and that trusting relationship with our community members. And even going back to if treatments, the situation at hand, and say we found funding for them to go for 30 days and they made it 5 days, that's still a success in my book, because they went. They went for 5 days, and next time they might go for 7 days, or the time after that they might, do you know what I mean? So it's all about that encouraging and just building that trust, and the community member knowing that they can reach out to us at any time. And that's the biggest part and the rewarding part of this job, is because sometimes you're taking a community member that's had nobody, and doesn't trust anybody. And over time, you build that up. And now you're getting a call at 10 o'clock at night saying, I've relapsed, I want detox. They trust you enough to get them the resources they need, and that you're safely going to make sure they're going to get what they want. That's a success. Whether it's big or small steps, they're all successes when like that going forward. And like Heather said, we'll get a lot of intakes done and they don't go anywhere past that. And that's okay. They're still on file, and we hope to bump into them again, and that when they're ready, they'll try again. One of the biggest reasons, I could just say this on a personal level, so prior to this job, I worked in our local detox center. And what bothered me here as an addictions crisis worker at our detox center is I could only see the individuals that came through that door when they had a relapse. I was not allowed to have that relationship with them outside of that building. That didn't sit well with me, because I thought, well, what if they had that person they could call? Do you know what I mean? And this pilot project came up for my journey back home, and it kind of checked all those missing boxes. I'm like, I get to work out of 9 to 5. I get to have those relationships. I get to knock on doors and really, we've done intakes in back alleys because that's where they are. I mean, in the tent encampments, like, that was the part that really got to me, and being able to help on that side of it. Well, what can we do on the prevention side possibly, instead of just after the fact? And that's why this program really stands out and really holds true to my heart, because we are set differently. Crisis situations don't happen Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. If they did, then none of us would have to work overtime. So, and then through this program, we advocated for another aftercare worker so we could double our intakes. And now we're trying to extend on this program because we need even more. So that's kind of where we're at.
We have a question from Sherry Hicks. Go ahead, Sherry.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this really inspiring work. I really like the fact that you talk about, building a program that works for families as opposed to the reverse and for individuals, right? I'm really curious to know what your experience has been working with children's aid societies and Indigenous child and well-being agencies. And when you speak about addiction, oftentimes what I find a struggle in terms of looking for resources is at the same time that somebody is open and interested in working through their addiction issues. Are you familiar with programs that are also concurrently working with these individuals and their connections with their children? Because sometimes those connections are severed, and sometimes that can be so harmful and hurtful for individuals, right? And it becomes, people start to feel like, what's my reason for being, and continuing to move on. So just kind of cognizant of the impact of other experiences that people have, and wondering what your great work that you've been doing, and how you might have been able to work through some of these things.
Thank you for your great questions. I'll let Heather mostly answer this one, but I'll just say for myself, I have worked with, I won't name them, but outside agencies where the child is in care of an agency, but living with an extended family member. And the reason we would come on board is because their primary worker within that agency was difficult to get a hold of, and there was no advocacy happening for the youth. So when we come on board, we work as excuse me, the child and the family's advocate to the worker that should be the one fighting for them. In a kind, courteous, don't take no for an answer kind of way, which is another reason why the circle really helps with this program, because that agency is being called out, but not in a negative way, in a way like, we want this support, we want to make this work, we need to find, a common ground and moving forward in a positive, helpful manner. And again, that's why the circle works. As for the children with their families, we always make sure if somebody is going away for addictions treatment, because generally they are leaving Thunder Bay to do so, we always make sure that if they do have children, that they're cared for. I'm going to let Heather speak on the part when it comes to agencies for that part, just because that's more for her other program as well.
Okay, so with the agencies, as Kristy was saying, is that so I do have we have My Journey Back Home, then we have another programs called the Talking Together program. So with that one, I feel I have more experience working with the child welfare agencies in our Thunder Bay area here. And then we do the same circle process, having a traditional circle there with them. And then we get involved in figuring out what the agency's needs are, what can we do to minimize the risk. By coming into the circle, they're able to share those feelings and words, right? And then together they make that decision as to what needs to happen next. And I always say, like, what needs to happen next, it could be maybe it's the parenting plan, or if it's not a parenting prep plan, maybe it's a mental health, or where they have to do counseling. And then we work together. And I always say we, because I want to make sure that everyone's on the same page when we're talking in that circle. And then that way we have the ability to make a plan, identify the plan, figure it out together. And then moving forward is how can we achieve that plan, right? And working together, figuring out what the needs are. And then if we're working with the agency itself, then we have to figure out what they need. And it's all, whenever I mention this, it could be very random. But it all depends on what the needs are for that individual. That's different from each person, right? And how they are able to achieve that. We work together and make a plan all together. But when we're working with the agency, we always have to have the ability to talk with them each and every other day, creating a positive communication. I'm sorry, my laptop's almost going to die here. Plug it in. But yeah, so working with everybody together, having the signed consent forms there, the ability to share privileges with everyone to identify what needs to happen.
So
Thanks so
Heather's,
much.
yeah, so just to kind of finalize on that, Heather's Talking Together program would be more of the program to put together an actual custody arrangement where for my position with my journey back home, I can assist and support the individual to those appointments with other agencies that are trying to figure out the child welfare custody aspect. I'd just be there as a support advocate on their behalf.
Thank you. Great work.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Kristy and Heather, do you have any other thoughts or any other information that you wanted to get out today before the end of the workshop?
I just want to say thank you. I appreciate the time for us being able to, inform you guys of what my journey back home is. And our hope is that this program will grow and grow outside of Thunder Bay as well, because the need is desperately there. So, and I appreciate your time.
I notice on your last page here on your PowerPoint, both of your email addresses are there, but if you wouldn't mind popping it, both of you popping it into the chat, just in case people in the audience wanted to reach out to you or had any follow-up questions that potentially will come to each of us following the conclusion of this meeting today. I just wanted to say to you both, thank you so much for your patience and your grace. I understand that the one of the main plenaries that was happening just prior to your workshop ended late. So there was a bit of chaos in our workshop room here. And so we did the opening and introductions, and a whole bunch of people joined at that moment. So I can appreciate how that can set the tone. So I just want to say thank you for showing grace and patience, because I didn't feel as supportive to both of you in that moment in time. So thank you. And thank you for sharing your thoughts and wisdom.
Thank you guys again.
Thank you.
So the next group will be starting at 3:15. There will be a break from 3 to 3:15. I'm just wanting to make sure we don't have anything else. We're getting lots of thank yous, and thank you very much from the chat. So
And
you
if
all have a
anybody
few
does
more
have
minutes
any-
before your third workshop of the day, in which you will be choosing which of the workshops, just like this one that you did, room A, B, or C. So wishing you all a wonderful duration of the PD day today. Thank you all so much.
Thanks.